طيب نبلش احنا. يسعد صباحكم جميعا. هذا الصباح الجميل بنرحب فيكم جميعا كمتحدثين وخبراء في مجال الشمول الرقمي. نشكر اكتد ومعا وال AFD على دعمهم لهذا المنتدى في فلسطين كونفرنس والقائمين والمنظمين له. عنوان جلستنا راح تكون من ضمن الجلسات عنوانها عن الإدماج الرقمي وشموليته، وراح نتعاطى مع أكثر من محور فيها فيما يتعلق بالجيفرنانس والحوكمة ومدى توفر وسهولة الوصول إلى الأدوات والأجهزة الرقمية وجودتها، وكذلك التعليم، محو التعليم أو محو الأمية الرقمية، محو الأمية الرقمية لدى الجميع. إيش الوضع الحالي في فلسطين؟ كيف وضع غزة؟ ما هم اللاعبين الرئيسيين في هذا السياق لضمان جودة ووصول هذه الأجهزة للناس، بالإضافة إلى محو الأمية الرقمية، وكيف في عندنا خطط مستقبلية، في نظرة، في استراتيجية، في فيجن، بالإضافة إلى موضوع له علاقة في موقعنا من الإعراب بالنسبة للدول المجاورة ك good practices بالنسبة للدول المحيطة فينا، وضعنا وكيف في فلسطين، وبالذات إنه الموضوع توقيت المنتدى بهذا العنوان حاليا جدا مناسب برأيي، لأنه الإدماج الرقمي صار كثير حاجة ملحة، هو من زمان مطلوب، ولكن في البوست كوفيد 19 إيرا وما بعد كورونا وما ترتب عليها من استخدام مهول للإنترنت والبنية التحتية والتابلتس والموبايلز والتعليم الإلكتروني والتعلم عن بعد والتجارة الإلكترونية والعمل في الشركات عن بعد، كله صارت حاجة ملحة أكثر. فكويس نشوف كمان وضع المرأة في هذا السياق، لأنه أحد ثيمز هذا المنتدى موضوع الكواليتي في مواضيع المرأة وحصولها، لأنه إحنا بنؤمن
to enable women to be able to access the digital sector, and especially for mothers to keep up with the education of their sons and children, and the importance of everyone to get the digital literacy. I welcome our treasured guests with Saida Afouni. Unfortunately, she had an accident. Unfortunately, she's at hospital. I welcome our guests and experts in this sector. We start with the speakers. The brothers Muhammad Al-Afifi, a lecturer with a 14-year experience in freelancing, with a master's from Bruxelles in business management, and works as a lecturer in applied science college. And he's also a trainer, like in UNRWA and Catholic Relief and Islamic Relief and Global Innovation Catholic. And we welcome you, Mr. Muhammad and Mr. Najjar. He's establisher and the CEO of this institution of education. And by the way, Mr. Jihad had amazing efforts to the success of this sector in Palestine, which will be launched today, which is DigiPal, which is going to be a very important source of information technology. And Dr. Jihad has a master's degree from the University of Leuven, and he works in many European projects in education and training. Dr. Islam Amir, he's a doctor and engineer. Islam currently is a lecturer assistant in the university, and he is a CIS lecturer. He has a lot of contributions in many aspects, and he leads many members in the university regarding the media education, and he worked as an expert in many local and international institutions like UNESCO and many others. He has many contributions, scientific ones, in his field, and he has many publications in education integration systems that cover many projects and sectors. And I hope that you guys get to know our speakers better and take the recommendations later to come out with the conclusions and recommendations that will be implemented in the future. Dr. Ahmed Uthman had worked as he had many positions, as one of which was general manager in education and technical education and the testing sector. Thank you for your contribution. He has many contributions and reports and studies and publications in education and IT and other fields. We welcome our dear guests and we hope Dr. Saida gets well soon. We start the session. It will be interactive and fun with Dr. Ahmed talking about the Palestinian youth and the current situation regarding the digital illiteracy. Now, to achieve digital literacy and the quality and equality of getting digital devices, how do you evaluate the situation and how would you respond, especially as a lecturer, as a part-timer, and you have many activities in different universities, not only the government sector, but also in the private ones. What do you think, Dr. Ahmed? Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. This is a very important forum today, and we hope to use it for the good. The current situation, especially after the pandemic, showed that the image is not complete. What we have from the equality and the availability of the devices and confidentiality of information and technology and communication, all of these disclosed many information after conducting a lot of research and studies. The image was not complete, but accordingly, there grew a tendency of the ministry to set a policy, a long-term one, towards digital transformation from a perspective of a long-term development to higher education and other sectors. Now, we of course know that the pandemic showed many critical issues that made us think more deeply in our need for an inclusive and comprehensive transformation in higher education. We cooperated with many local and international partners, and we hope to get a long-term sponsorship to help us with the digital and technological transformation to provide the students and graduates with the devices needed. We don't only work on a local level, we also want to have a presence internationally in different institutions, economically, in the neighboring countries and internationally. We have an ambitious plan by the ministry. We talk about 5 main pillars. The first, we know that the Palestinian universities are independent and they have the right to manage themselves, but we also hope at the ministry and we planned for the activities to have learning activities, because we hope to have a national management of the education systems. We have a number of pillars like virtual classes and other courses related to the management system. The other one is the other pillar we talk about is the long-term plan by the government and the sponsoring partners, which is the e-learning system. We, due to the pandemic, we directly switched to the online learning. And of course, universities were very successful doing that, but we faced many obstacles. Now we're talking about organizing this process among a flexible system that helps the state to manage the operations better and have a better outcome of education by the students. So we're talking about organizing this process with all of the partners locally and internationally and the UNESCO to have it in an Arab framework. The third one is the virtual labs installation, how to set them up, and that's not only in pandemic, but also to have it as a supporting pillar on a long term. It will not be an alternative for the face-to-face education, but it will be a supporting one once we need it. The plan before the last is the services provided by the ministry and the universities to the students, from administrative services, registration, and others. They all have to be computerized and in line with the policies of digital transformation and the plan of the Ministry of Communication. So they have to be in line with the national policies, regardless of where the teachers are. And the fifth one is building the capacities on all levels in the ministry, with the universities and other institutions with the sponsors needed to build the capacities and have a better culture regarding the digital transformation. So to have studied and well-versed digital transformation, these are the main pillars of the tendencies of the university, of the ministry regarding the future. Thank you, and I welcome all of the questions. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Going to Mr. Ahmed Afifi talking about Gaza and the speciality of Gaza regarding the equality and reaching all the sectors of the society to enable the digital literacy. We would like to learn more about the current situation in Gaza regarding the digitalization and illiteracy, digital illiteracy, and the devices needed, and of course the digital training and education. Also, we know the obstacles like the cuts of electricity, and we would love to hear from you about these. Could you tell us about the challenges? Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Maybe the situation in Gaza is maybe completely different from all, and it's worthy of shedding the light on it. We have challenges that can be resolved and faced. And these allowed us to have innovative solutions by the young people, either on a local level or by international support. Of course, we're talking about the siege that's been lasting for many years and the closure of the checkpoints. We're talking about very high rates of unemployment. The unemployment rate is 45%, which is scary. And we're looking at different majors. It's very painful to see the universities graduate many numbers of students. However, the local market doesn't have the capacity to have them all. So this current situation enabled the young people to look at a different dimension. And let me give you a practical example, especially the incubators. and how they were able to keep a pace with this challenge. We are able to have a young person with the capacity needed. Now, this person has to have personal capacities, and his environment need to enable him to achieve the success he wants. So we're talking about the family, we're talking about the mental capacities and the centers and training centers that are needed to enable this person to enter the labor market. So now we're talking about a number of points. Number one, we give training courses in Gaza. However, the students do not usually have a laptop. So now through the sponsorship programs, we want to provide these services, at least a computer to the student, or we can initially or at first provide them with but um, they are met with other challenges like the shortcut of electricity. We're also talking about the illiteracy of using the devices regarding the technological majors, especially majors that are not related to technology. You see the gap in the digital literacy. We are also talking about the infrastructure needed. So this causes us a major problem because we can't reach the technological means needed. For example, the college made majors for this aspect. Now we're able to bridge the gap between the student and the outer market. Why should you have only the basic skills? Now, when you look at the different majors, we look at the practical side too. Now, all of the universities and educational institutions, we enable the student to work on the practical technology. For example, media, they study many technological courses, so they're enabled as graduates to work digitally in this sector, in this major. But now we have a major problem, which is the mindset and the attitude of the students. Students now are used to one thing, and it's different for them to think other way, but the pandemic helped them broaden their perspective and have an open mind working with technology. If we want to look at the brighter side, the students were able to use technology due to the pandemic. This allowed us to have the opportunity to transfer them to job opportunities that they need these digital capacities with. And now we're working on the digital inclusion of the student, so they're able to enter the labor market. So now we used to say in universities, like we used to talk about the capacities and how they're enough or not to the labor market, but now we're talking about that internationally. For example, talking about education, yes, let them work on this aspect in the local market and internationally, because this will enable them to develop themselves and their capacities largely. So your university major, you can use that to invest in yourself and to work internationally. Now, I'm not trying to say, well, I'm only looking at the bright side. Yes, there are many challenges, but the hope is bigger because all of these challenges allowed us to have the hope and to made us more innovative and find better and more innovative solutions, especially regarding the current situation that is so difficult for the young people. So this helped them be enabled technologically to face these obstacles. So we need to focus on digitalization in all fields and aspects, not only the information technology and communication. we need to apply it among an appropriate strategy. And we are brainstorming basically right now. And I'm hoping to use your experiences to get fruitful solutions. Thank you very much, Muhammad. We've heard it a lot, and it's the truth. A lot of people are talking about the pandemic. Yes, it is a problem, but it led us to think more innovatively in technology. Thank you. The engineer Islam Amar. For talking governance and policy makers and other responsibilities in the state, who do you think, where do you think should we start to achieve the equality of digital devices and the equality of their distribution to everyone? Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all of the colleagues. Mr. Hassan, of course, now regarding the stakeholders and partners, Mr. Muhammad, who talked about the levels of knowledge and how they're important to be taken into consideration, and Mr. Uthman, our colleague, who talked about causes of creating partnerships. So all of these are going into the right direction. Honestly, I followed a different methodology talking about this topic. I referred to the digital literacy in two regions in the world. The first is the most interested in digital science, which is the ITU, and you have different and several documents. And now I refer to their logic regarding the definitions and their understanding of stakeholders. Of course, there's specific scenarios regarding them, and this very developed country and the governmental control, this gives us an approach to follow, which means that the state is responsible for everything that happens in it. So the model that was very enriching is the European Union model regarding the digital literacy. I just followed it to be enriched by the information they provided. I'd like to talk about the body of knowledge of the digital literacy, what it consists of, and the levels of knowledge among it, the beginner, intermediate, and advanced, which Mr. Muhammad talked about, which is the advanced level, and we have talking about management of these environments from the perspective of experts, and creating and finding more labor markets. And it's very important to have these levels. Mr. Ahmed Uthman talked about the intervention of a strategy, of a national strategy, about the owner and all of these details. So there are different shapes and forms. I want to introduce you to what I created. You have the authority. Who can help me show what I want to show?
Shall we ask the admin to grant Dr. Amir so that he can share his presentation?
Okay. Not yet. Anybody there? Okay, there is no access yet. Okay, never mind.
ما مشكلة ابتسام، حاول اعملها بدون شو اسمه.
Could you tell us about it? I will use my personal computer like this. Can you see it? I hope you can read it.
That's funny.
No, it's inverted.
تمام دكتور كانت.
لا هي inverted كانت صح ولا أنا كنت inverted؟
أنا شفتها كانت كويسة أعتقد.
لا هو
It's good. Is it inverted? Let me check.
مقروءة هيك. No.
مقروءة هي inverted بالنسبة لك، بالنسبة لنا بتكون كويسة.
It's inverted to you, but it's not to us.
أنتوا قارئين
So you can read. Yeah, we're good.
طيب على عجالة ensuring digital literacy مبينة عندكم مضبوطة؟
Can you see it clearly?
طيب بشكل عام ensuring for
In general,
literacy طبعا أنا I will share the presentation.
I will share the presentation. The digital skills, its definition is the group of skills and capacities required to use of digital devices and application online. And the most important thing that we need to focus on, which is the expansion of the information technology in the digital world, with people who are equipped with the capacities needed by the young people to interact with this sector. The digital skills are either basic, medium, and advanced. The basic that are needed to write and use their digital devices and to enrich our lives. Of course, the pandemic covered and bridged this gap. While we know for sure that we need further research to verify this, but the pandemic allowed us to bridge the gap regarding this sector. But for the medium, skills are for the evaluation of the content and give us opportunities. And there is a gap regarding this one in Palestine, how to include ICT in our daily life as technicians and others. We need to focus on this aspect. There's an acceleration regarding the medium level skills regarding showing these skills, like making any business in a digital field. And this is, of course, not an IT business only, but it could be anything that are built on the medium level skills. And then advanced level, which are related to the literacy skills, regarding academic skills, which were mentioned by Dr. Afifi, like what we have qualifications and knowledge needed and other problems in ICT and the nature of the changes in this subject. And 10 years ago in the market, it was the problem was that we always need Cisco engineers. Now the whole thing changed. Now we entered the AI. The standards changed and our needs changed. So the academic planning helps cover these needs and bridge the gap, especially because they keep changing all the time. So we need to find better solutions in a shorter time through reading, training and academic teaching. And these are a chart of the skills. The first, the green is the basic skills, and in white is the medium level skills, like digital market and charts. And then the blue one is the advanced skills regarding cybersecurity, AI, and so we need to have a good understanding of these skills and the reflections on the Palestinian society to make an intervention with a larger impact on the reality and on the ground. So the relationship has to be studied well. In EU, they defined what's called the DIGCOM, which is how would I equip the citizen to be competent digitally? So browsing and searching for information, and then evaluation of data and information and digital content, and the management of data. And then we move to the ethics of using data, and then making the digital contents and the relationship in this topic, and the reuse of the content and programming the content. And then we're talking about safety of personal data and the privacy and health. And then we move to a more advanced level, which is the problem solving, like the problem solving among this sector. So as you can see, we have a set of levels to address them in a Palestinian context, and we will find that they are very much applicable in Palestine, but we just need to work further on them. Who are the stakeholders? At first, we need to talk about stakeholders because it's a multi-sectoral topic. It's creating the work and having a sponsor for them. Many countries followed this methodology, and others created a coalition. Regardless of the methodology, we have to have an authority to mandate. It's not only about giving suggestions, but to have a policy that is mandatory. So regarding stakeholders, we need to have a leadership regarding this aspect. And then we're talking about government agencies with digital skills needed to efficiently participate in this aspect. Now I have an example. Ahmed Yunus, who has a good experience regarding digital transformation in Saudi Arabia. He said that Saudi Arabia was very successful doing that only because it started the government, the e-government, the application of it. So that created a very good digital literacy. So how to evolve and how to develop. So we need to be smart and selective regarding the solutions in this sector. And of course, the digital economy, the communication, technology of information technology and communication, the workforce, education, all of these are government agencies, according to the things we just said, that are very important to the digital literacy. Of course, the education institutions and the private sectors have very major impacts on this, and the private companies too, education institutions too. So now we are looking at it according to our understanding and how they identified, which is completely applicable in Palestine, and it can help us analyze the Palestinian context according to this understanding. So we have different models of the participation of stakeholders. For example, talking about e-learning, this is a space for us to have a forum about digital education, which will help us exchange knowledge, like affiliations and unions and civil society entities that work specifically on this topic. It could be supervisory, or to have a research role, So it's very important to have these models of participation to put the stakeholders together. And then we are talking about consumptions, and that are interested in having forums about Arabic language and teaching and learning, and digital economy, and many other topics that can be used in such forums. So we can focus on digital literacy. They can work among a specific model. And then we have task forces, like having national task forces, which allows us to work very largely on this regarding the digital literacy, to identify all of these topics, because we have a major gap in digital literacy. And the third level, according to the EU, we have a major problem. We talked about education, we talked about e-commerce, we have a large opportunity, and we're talking about financial currencies, and it's a very hot topic we can talk about. Now, how to address these things? We have two columns. The first talks about the policies that revolve around the information technology and communication, and other policies that talk about specific sector and how they reflect on the digital literacy. Now, we're talking about on the level of the government. We take each sector and allow them to have a transformation regarding the ICT, like digital economics and communication policies and digital inclusion and the broadband, and the technology is there, like 3G and 4G, and the trust funds for services and access to everyone. And then how we can access this, how to work again, to read our strategies and work through a multi-sectoral approach to have good national references regarding this matter. For example, the education, we need to work on it. We can expand our knowledge there in other sectors. How to mobilize? Now, there is a suggestion on how to get ready working with stakeholders for these skills and how to identify them, working as counselors or consortium. And then we go to different approaches we can follow, and then drafting, and then the social discussion, and then we can go to optimizing our strategy and the mobilization, and then kicking the ball at the end, how to identify the projects and interventions, portfolios, and the practices of the communities, like education and health, etc. And the organization by having the data displayed and analyzed. This is very simple and generic, but it makes sense to integrate things and put them together. What should we do? These are my recommendations. We have to have, by the way, this is just a draft, this is not the final product. There's a need to raise the awareness of social awareness. As Dr. Ahmed said, there is major efforts put forward in this topic. We need to convey the message of having economic opportunities and development ones. It can benefit Palestine and its society. There's also the need to identify the stakeholders and creating coalition and work groups to work on this context and mainstreaming the topic and transitioning to a national strategy. And we should also build academic coalitions and research ones, service ones, government ones, and commercial ones in this topic. Like for example, regarding the commerce, we can benefit from the olive industry. We can work on this, and the municipalities can also help us. And academic research also like always to work on this. And academia has a big role in making clear the economic opportunities. Now, I recommend the good practice, learning from other people's experiences and going to the e-training. As Palestinians, we have a lot of experiences, and we also have the weakness of the Arabic language. We can work in Arabic-speaking countries. In summary, we talked about stakeholders and the levels of these skills. We also talked about the citizenship and the components needed of digital literacy and the stakeholders and how to organize them, starting with the leadership and moving to other interested sectors. We also talked about the practices needed that we need to work on, mobilizing the forces and the efforts and kicking off such projects. These are the key recommendations. Thank you very much. This is all I have to say. Thank you very much. This is a comprehensive and a sufficient feedback. These are very treasured recommendations, like creating the bodies in coalitions and the cross-sectoral strategies, because simply digital inclusion can only be achieved through the quality digital devices. So when we're talking about sustainable development, we have to start from there. So thank you very much. That was amazing. And then we have Dr. Jihad Najjar. You have a long experience living in Europe. What do you think are the tools or the strategies we need to follow and use to enable the digital tools to achieve the sustainable development and digital inclusion? What is the strategy that is needed to be followed? Should it be linked to economy, sponsorship? What should we do? What is the strategies that we need to follow to achieve that and to achieve the sustainable development? Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan, and good morning to everyone, my colleagues, and Dr. Islam. He gave the theory that I will try to elaborate on from the practical side, given my experience. The question is not easy, it's very difficult, because every country has its own context and goals. Every country has its own, capacities. So maybe the question I can say that how can we create an efficient strategy that is also applicable? It's very important that it's applicable in Palestine to ensure the digital inclusion of people. Yes, true. because there are many strategies. If we're talking internationally, there are many major and massive strategies followed. So applying these strategies is the thing that we need to ask about. It's according to, it's not just a theory thing, it's also an experimental thing. So Palestine also has a simple experience. If we're talking about Palestine, how can this strategy, how can we build the strategy needed? First of all, the strategy needs to be built based on objectives. There must be a strategy, and of course, the strategy has to be adopted by a government entity. With it has to be mandatory, and it can be just a body, you know. But no, this institution should set the strategy and objectives. This is very important. What are our objectives? Where do we want to reach using this technology? The objectives we set, we have to set along initiatives. Those initiatives shall be sponsored well to enable their access as follows. These initiatives need to be built based on partnerships from sides or institutions of the government, like the education using technology. We need to be involved and we need to be successful locally before we export our experiences internationally. How can we ensure a good involvement of the government? The international partnerships are very important. We're not only talking about signing contracts, but also partnership of companies. We're talking about major companies that are effective in Palestine. These companies have to be involved in these initiatives with a clear commitment to the government. This commitment has to be linked with the objectives. The problem with this strategy is that its tendency would be one thing, and then when they are sponsored by an international institution, this tendency would be affected or impacted. So the sponsorship by international institutions has to be according to our needs and in what sector I'm working. So for example, if I'm working in agriculture, I'm talking how I want to develop this sector digitally. My need has to be made clear with the objectives. And then we have internal partnerships. Like they're just as important as international partnerships. If we want to reach our objectives, we have to start with having everyone work together. All partners around the world, they all have to work, and all ministries have to be mandated, and it has to be mandatory and not optional, with a punishment. Some colleagues mentioned experiences like the KSA. It's mandatory on every ministry to reach that objective. So these internal partnerships among the ministries and universities has to be serious and mandatory. This is making objectives clear and the partnership too. Also the commitment, it has to be made clear, as well as the involvement of the private sector in Palestine. We're talking about the involvement and inclusion of the objectives of the company by fulfilling the objectives of the state. For example, if the company wants to develop a certain solution, like enabling the Palestinian youth, I have to create an initiative to the Palestinian youth and give them anything to train the Palestinian youth. But no, it has to be among projects and it has to be clear and to enable those young people to have a real experience, a worthy one. Now let's talk about another thing, which is the digital skills. Part of this strategy, digital skills and strategies and all of these things, they all have to be built on trial. What he mentioned, Mr. Islam, about the experiences in Gaza and the opportunities created the success. It has to be created on trial and error, and let's have it fail many times until we succeed. Part of this strategy is that we have to fail in order to learn from our mistakes. This will help us involve and include everyone, even women and female students, and give them opportunities. For example, if we're talking about digital content, women can be very successful in this sector if we enhance their digital skills. So unfortunately, it's still lacking, but it is very important. So being brave is very important, and trying and maybe failing is also important. We also, well, I attended many workshops. We want to succeed in everything. We want to succeed, but do we want Palestine to succeed in e-commerce or in logistics? Maybe we have a good seed to start from and to build on. For example, if we have good logistics, let's start from there. And then in the e-health too, let's define a couple of 3 sectors to start from, to start building the capacities from there. And to focus on a couple or more or 3 sectors. This will make it more clear. The prize and award of the successful, or those who succeed, that I want to award those who succeed to enable them to succeed more. So we're talking about incentives that have to be real. We're talking about a real issue. In Palestine, unfortunately, we celebrate way too soon. Yes, it's nice to celebrate, but we have to celebrate once we accomplish the change that we want, because it, yes, incites us to achieve and to succeed more. And it incites other people too. So it makes us think that, well, success is not that difficult. So maybe incentives should be among our strategies in the future. I also have a couple of ideas of case studies. I will add them to my upcoming feedback or income. I will talk about it further in a minute. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I'm very happy to be working as part of the team of creating a strategy in Palestine in this current month. And we are adding our final touches. I am honored to look at an enriched literature about many experiences, international ones, talking about entrepreneurship. So now I believe, yes, Palestinians want to succeed in everything, but there's a school of thought that talks about, well, it's difficult to compare our experiences to other countries which are already very developed in those sectors. So it's a cross-sectoral matter when you're talking about digital inclusion. It's if we're talking about other countries, they are developed in many fields, and the sectors today are very cross-sectoral. Sectors are not standalone ones. So in a short time, hopefully, we will be able to have them all the sectors eligible to be digitally included, and them as well as other sectors with the infrastructure needed, with the policies and strategies also needed to accomplish that, and the digital literacy. I am talking about this because it's a very major, important one to talk about. For example, we have issues regarding the 4G and the financial situation of people. Thousands of young people are being trained digitally, and they have to watch on a tablet instead of a laptop because their laptops are broken and they don't have the capacity to fix them. So this is a challenge. I like to talk about it and talk about the localization, about our experience in Palestine regarding the digital transformation. And I look forward to listen to all of the experiences. We are talking about specific sectors in our strategy, but inshallah one day we will be able to talk about it more specifically, and all of the needed infrastructure will be provided. Thank you. Now, according to the schedule, we are online. We want to see if we have any questions. Let's take a 15 minutes to talk about some things, some points. But first, I would like to talk about TVET and the digitalization of it. And the technical education shall not be exclusive to those students. It has to focus on the digital skills used online. I am lucky to be the leader of the team in World Skill competition, and we were among many countries. There were many fields covered, but now they are among the TVET sector. How can we now talk about digitalization of education, including the technical education? Anyone who would like to add anything? Dr. Ahmed Osman, you are in the higher education. We have a number of applied science colleges, how do we look at digital inclusion to create job opportunities, especially talking about gender equality? We have some female participants. One of them doesn't work mechanics, works in the mechanics, and so how can we ensure a better inclusion digitally to female participants? Yes. Regarding the feedback of people, there was fragmentation since 1998 and 2014. I have a long experience in this field. There came a national strategy about it. The first was launched in 1999, which was signed by Yasser Arafat, and the strategy was not implemented, but every time German and other partners reset the strategy, but we want the current strategy that started with the national body that started a year ago, that started looking at the University of Palestine and the Najah University as a good way to start. The problem with this is that it's very complicated. We're talking about training providers like Hijawi and other institutions that give any type of trainings. So it's not about the training providers. It's about the restructure of the market and the market of the market in Palestine, that it needs a restructure because they are not equipped with the education needed to do that. So it's not the work or the job of the university, it's actually a personal one, individual one. Also, we need to restructure the market. And if we talked about the skills needed, then we can move to a next stage where we can define the skills so we can benefit locally and internationally. Now we have graduates working at Google and Yahoo, and who have more expertise, who have more experience in this field. We have educational programs, but the fragmentation that every institution works alone, we're not planning together. That's a problem. And the bigger one is that we're talking about very ambitious plan. Even the USA cannot develop them. So we're very ambitious, but we have a lot of limitations on the ground, and that destroys us. So regarding the e-education, it has to be in coordination with all of the parts. We all need to work together, using or following simple plans at first. And the major problem here is that we don't have data about the devices and digital literacy. We don't have the data needed. How am I going to build a plan if I don't have the data needed to do that? I don't know the level of education of people, so I need reliable data and tools to start building an innovative plan for 1 or more years in the future. So this is very important in technical education. We are longing to have a unified system on the national level to ensure that. Thank you. This is very true. I agree with you, having an open government and how it's important to have available and collect the data needed, upon which we will create the plans needed. Okay, moving on to the next topic. Of course, everything has its own positive and negative sides. For example, we're talking about hacking and cybersecurity, and the security of information and infrastructure, etc. We have to also work in line with these systems by training and capacity building, especially that the internet is allowed to everyone and everyone has, access to the internet, and we had contributed largely to the cybersecurity. I'm talking about security as part of a larger system of the digital inclusion. So it's not only about giving them the device and connecting it to the internet, but also there are ethics and values and laws that need to be taken into consideration. How do I give this the light it needs to be shed on? As Islam said about the Arab experience, and all of other systems said about or talked about, how can we link the digital literacy by saying that digital literacy has to be studied not only in a direct aspect, but also, for example, the cyber security? Who would like to work on this? It's not only about allowing access to it to everyone. Anyone would like to comment? Allow me, Brother Hassan, to talk about it. Well, we're talking about security and privacy. This is a misconception, a national misconception about it. The privacy and security and the security of property of others and the compliance and standards, this is a national and the government responsibility. I worked with a company that works in encryption level, and it's part of Omnisec, which is a corporate. So they give solutions and they give banking solutions. How do these companies plan for this work? They work based on specific standards that fit the American standards. And now today we are still looking at it as it is adapted by these corporates. There is no security regarding people's information. We are teaching people how to take care of it. We're asking people to learn martial art. But people on the internet, they need to be protected by the systems and the government. So the skills needed in the security by people, it shouldn't be very high. It should be the responsibility of other parts. So I want all higher education institutions to give their services based on ISO, their standards. So banks wanting their security levels to fit 2.5. We link our banks with other banks internationally, so there has to be national standards to begin with. There also the needs to, of course, to raise awareness of people regarding it. Talking about AI and virtual reality, we have two parts and sections to talk about. The first is the means and education means, and how do I give people better tools for education. And the second that is needed is that I was assigned for 4 months to draft an accreditation framework of e-learning with the law of e-learning. And I'm not an expert in this, but I had a remark. For example, Germany, while I was conducting the survey, I learned that Germany has 8 accreditation institutions. Now, what is an accreditation credit? Maybe at the beginning of the 70s of the last century, all of the education institutions were production institutions. So TEVIT, what is required there is to go back to the model and to look at AI as part of the introduction. So this becomes a condition of this plan. So this is an industrial environment. We're talking about experts and professional people working in this sector. The second thing is people do not work together here. Well, coordination should not be an optional thing. It has to be mandatory, and there has to be control over what people do to ensure the balance of people's benefits. So talking about security and privacy, there has to be standards on this beforehand. And of course, talking about TEVIT and having new accreditation parties to mandate people to work together. So it's not a complementary aspect. It has to be like that. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. Talked about the cyber aspect. At the beginning of every month, we have the cybersecurity aspect that we work on with the different activities. So we're talking about mainly about the awareness. So using activities to raise people's awareness regarding their security. Yes, Muhammad. I just wanted to confirm why raising awareness is very important. Because as a Palestinian community, we are targeted by the occupation. And just the common targeting by anyone as individuals. Yesterday, I was with a female student. She received a link which caused her to have issues on her laptop. So I asked her not to click on any link that's sent to her. And we have many similar experiences like these. Now, raising awareness regarding security practices is very important now. And who do you give your device to? And all of these very basic things and technical things people do because they don't have technical knowledge needed to work properly with the internet, which made them face a major problem. That's why I want to stress raising people's awareness. And in Gaza, we have a lot of support by many institutions getting into this sector in education. We're left with the cultural aspect of people accepting it. I worked with the entrepreneurship with the UNRWA, so I saw first-handedly the importance of this sector and the challenges regarding education. They were majorly excluded from this, and these practical majors, they have to be studied differently. The question is, Can I make these people invest with their knowledge in different fields? Of course, digital skills aren't always employed for that, and I don't always have the capacity to work online in this sector.
لأي واحد فيكم، هل تروا إنه مشان عدالة الوصول للأجهزة الرقمية ممكن
To ensure the equality of digital
هل
inclusion,
DC fund
we had in the past EC
يضمن وصول الأجهزة الرقمية
fund.
لكل الناس
How can we ensure
أو بأسلوب مريح
providing these devices to people in an affordable ways
لابس مختبرات في المدارس بكثافة
and
أكبر
providing labs in schools?
نحكي عن العدالة والوصول إلى الأجهزة
We're talking about the equality and access of everyone to digital devices.
ممكن
تفضل.
Well,
ما بديش احكي على
I don't want to talk about the private sector. I just, because they know better.
اذا انت بدك تعمل national strategy
If we're talking about a national strategy and having an objectives,
شيء اساسي
the infrastructure is very important here. And providing the infrastructure should be the first pillar here.
يعني انت بدك تصنع تكنولوجيا
So if you want to create the technique, you need to have good infrastructure to do that,
للطلاب في الجامعات عشان يجربوا
especially to university students, to make them distinguished. So this is very important to provide the devices at a lower price. This allows us to access the digital skills needed to have good e-commerce. As a citizen, I want to know better about digital commerce, like buying a plane ticket or to buy a book online. But if we want to create a technology, we're talking about a strategy where we're creating a technology. It starts with creating an infrastructure and a strategy that has to be available in the universities and colleges. Especially by the private sector, they have to provide discounts to people, and it has to be done within a national strategy that will sponsor this digital transformation. This is my feedback.
كتبت أنا على الشات إنها open discussion.
We are about to end. I wrote in chat, this is an open discussion, so anyone who would like to intervene, please. This is my last remark and question. It's about the quality. What institution should ensure the quality of these digital devices? Who should be responsible to control the quality of the digital devices? Who would like to talk about this pillar? You wanted to add something. We're talking about quality. Anyone who would like to say anything about the quality of digital devices? I'd like to say something. Well, I'd like to talk about owning the devices. As Dr. Jihad said, there must be an institution that controls the quality of the devices. With all respect to the private sector, we should not ask people to buy these devices. They have to be provided to people in universities, so people can use them at any time. This has to be a right to people, and one entity shall be responsible to ensure that. So people don't have to buy things with very high standards, but just to make them available. And two, to start well, we don't want to go fast into an unstudied transformation. We're talking about our experience with Divot from 99 to until now. We have, regardless of the number of people responsible for the digital content, there must be one leader for the governance of these things. If there was not one leader to it that sponsors all of the and supervises all of the processes, we have to create a unit for the digital transformation, just so our efforts would bear the fruit
how to balance digitizing
needed.
the core with creating a new digital growth. كيف نعمل الموازنه بين الرقمنه الكور تبعها مع خلق او تعزيز النمو الرقمي.
طيب انا استاذ منذر بحاول يمكن
فهم قصده بالسؤال؟
كيسز. انا فهمت الجزء الثاني من السؤال.
I understood the second part of the question. But I think he means that we should focus on, leaving the core of technology, being distinguished in the core of it. I don't know. Well, I can answer the second half of the question. I don't really understand. He's talking about the basics, I think, the basics of technology. To better use our time. Mr. Munder can explain in text. I would like to talk about two cases that are important to be put in a strategy. But let's talk about them in the Palestinian context, because Palestine needs to be distinguished in one aspect. Let's talk about the digital skills in one sector. Now, we worked with Acted, and we're very happy we did. And we are focusing on the youth. This platform will provide the training opportunities to young people, Palestinian young people. Now, this tool is very important, but if we're talking nationally, how can we create an initiative? Because this system was created and it can be managed. To create this platform is very important that it has been established. But how can we cooperate and work together to manage this platform to ensure the success of it? And Palestine has many wonderful capacities in this field, in our company, in Palestine, even outside. So it's a very important part, and there are many important capacities. So how can we create cooperations in Palestine? Because providing the content and the trainings is very important. And one entity is not enough. There has to be partnerships, especially with common benefits. How can we enable people to provide the content with outcomes? The business model has to be clear. For example, okay, we worked on another initiative quickly, where with our colleagues in Technobar in Hebron, we're training Palestinian children ages 9 to 14 to the programming of IoT. where is this in a strategy? It's how do I enable the children at a very young age to work with their hands in difficult programming systems? This talks about the awareness. It's about programming the microbits, which are the basics of artificial intelligence. And most importantly, how they think to solve problems and how to build, for example, a smart gate that opens among with the sensor. So we allow these to be available in the hands of children. This is a very little and small example. Microbits, for example, they needed 5, we provided 20. So we provided them with international content. So our target is to work internationally. Our trainer is even British. So we're working on an international standard. We turned the curriculum of the Palestinian youth. We transformed it. How can we create 200 to 300 initiatives working on this to ensure the inclusion of all classes of society to enter this movement? How do I link it to every school and municipality? This is the point I wanted to talk about. And it has to be among a national strategy. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful. We have many academies that work in the electronic training. So there's many aspects to this. Only because of the time, I want to end with a final question from our brother Luay Qabaja. Guy says, do we need a national entity to ensure the digital transformation professionally and well? I think yes. Well, as everyone said, strategies are on paper. Of course, we need efficient application of the strategies, and we need them to be result oriented. We need impact analysis, and we want collective efforts to collect the data and analyze it. If anyone wants to add anything, please. There are 2 pillars of digital transformation we talked about just now. So development and 2, making new opportunities. I will answer these 2 in brief. What Mr. Ahmed said, all of the countries that were successful in achieving that, they all created national bodies. And there are people, there is a minister, and it's not in a traditional way of thinking. He was actually a bulldozer that enabled the digital transformation to happen. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Munder, in the countries, if one country is wealthy, we would set a top-down strategy and have 10 sectors and give them the priority for the development. But we're talking about Palestine with many economic limitations. I take the success stories and use them as a base of new success. So success is possible. We just need to know how to utilize it. Okay.
فأترك المجال لزملائي.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all.
بالضبط على الوقت والرسالة أديناها إن شاء الله والتوصيات شبه واضحة من صيغها.
Recommendations are clear. Your message is clear. I am Hassan Omar, General Manager of تميز.
تجمع عنقود الرياضيين والمبدعين أكاديميات جوكود وفلانسرز وجوتك وغيرها. أشكر ضيوفي.
I thank my guests and experts إسلام عمر، محمد العفيفي، أحمد عثمان.
والدكتور جاد نجار. الله يكون وفقنا في تناول المحور اللي
And I hope we are successful to get better recommendations. See you in future sessions. Goodbye.